Okay.
Good?
Yeah.
Okay. Good evening. I will call the August 2nd, 2016 Zoning Board of Appeals meeting to order. My name is Jim Wendt. I'm the chairman of the board. And starting all the way down to my right, I will let the other members identify themselves for the recording.
Ryan Condon, alternate.
Ben Maini, alternate.
Mike Pinto, alternate.
Marion Callow.
Dominic Panicia, member. Agresta Town Planner.
I believe since it's Mr. Pinto's turn, I believe, to sit for our vacant seat, and we will need one more, so it will be Mr. Maini's turn. You both sat last time, but we need two of you, so Mr. Maini will sit, and then Mr. Condon will sit next time. So for the purposes of this record, Mr. Pinto and Mr. Maini will be voting members of this evening. I will ask the secretary to read the notice of public hearing, please.
Notice of public hearing to be held on August 2nd, 2016. Notice is hereby given in accordance with the Connecticut General Statutes 8-7D that the following application will be the subject of the public hearing in the Town Hall Council Chambers, 7 Faneuil Road, Monroe, Connecticut, on Tuesday, August 2nd, 2016 at 7:30 p.m. or soon thereafter, to hear the testimony, public input, and receive correspondence concerning the following: ZBA-2016-04, file number 1784, 92 Pepper Street, Assessors Map 46, Lot 39.02. Application of Joseph Schoenberg, owner, for an area variance of 1.9.6 of the zoning regulations for property consisting of 2.9250 acres located in a residential and farming district 2, RF2. The area variance seeks to permit a minimum lot width at its narrowest point of 116.09 feet in lieu of the minimum lot width equal to the minimum required street frontage of 200 feet, extending parallel to said street frontage from the street line or front property line to the back side of the also required minimum 175 feet by 175 feet square. Complete details and copies of all related materials associated with the above matter are on file and available for viewing in the Monroe Planning and Zoning Department office, published in the Monroe Courier, Thursday, July 21st and Thursday, July 28th.
Thank you. Just before I call this matter, just some housekeeping. The applicant is going to make a presentation about this application. We will ask questions, after which anybody that wishes to be heard will have the opportunity to be heard. And after all of those folks are heard, if any, the applicant has the opportunity for rebuttal. So that is the way we are going to proceed. So with that, we will open file 1384. Mr. Quattrello.
For the record, my name is David Quattrella. I'm the attorney for the applicant. My office is at 2 Corporate Drive in Shelton, Connecticut. I'm representing Joseph Schoenberg. Mr. Schoenberg and his wife, Barbara, are seated a couple rows behind me. They've driven in from New York this evening, and they asked me to thank you for having this meeting just for us, I guess, tonight.
It is National Night Out, so, you know.
The application is actually relatively simple, although it's a mouthful to say exactly what the variance is. We're seeking a variance of section 1.9.6 of your zoning regulations to allow this vacant building lot to become a building lot again. Mr. Schoenberg appeared before you back in 2010. At that time, he owned almost 6 acres of land. There was a lot 1 and a lot 2. How do I get this down to the other old map? Well, is it down here?
This one. Yeah, I'll do it.
That one there? You'll do it? Thank you. All right. So I'm going to show the 2 lots. So I think the history of the lot and the history of the property is important because it's really the basis for our hardship that we're basing our variance on. All right. So what you see there are 2 lots, lots number 1 and lot number 2. Almost 6 acres of land. This property's been in Mr. Schoenberg's family for over 70 years. He actually inherited it in 2010 in March of 2010. And on June 1 of 2010, he appeared before you to get a variance so that lot number 1 would be a legal lot. That you see there's a house there at that time. This map is the one that was submitted back in 2010. That's the house that his family built, I believe in 1949, maybe 2 or 3 years after they acquired the property. And his family owned it, occupied it all that time. Mr. Schoenberg lives in New York, has lived in New York for many years, really wasn't using the house at the time he inherited it. And he was told he was entitled to a free cut because the property had not ever been subdivided since the time the family acquired it, long before that actually. So it predates your subdivision regulations and is entitled to that so-called first cut, which you've probably heard about before. The one thing though, in order to get the free cut, was they did need a variance on road frontage, because at that time, as at the present time, in the what's now the RF2 zone, you need 200 feet of frontage on the road. So in order to have two completely conforming lots, he would have needed 400 feet of frontage, which he did not have. He had about 143 feet of frontage for lot number 1, and he did have 200 feet of frontage for lot number 2. So he appeared before the Zoning Board of Appeals, was granted the variance on June 1 of 2010. The variance was granted as to lot number 1, which has a street address of 86 Pepper Street, and he sold that house off and that lot shortly after the approval. And shortly after, obviously, the division map was recorded. So what he was left with as of June 1 of 2010, and after he sold off lot number 1, is what you see there as lot number 2, which is just under 3 acres of land. And at that time, it was a completely conforming lot. It conformed with your bulk requirements, conformed with basically everything, lot area and bulk standards, and it had the minimum frontage. It also had the minimum square, which is in that wide area of the lot that you see that was just pointed out by Will. If we go to that, all right, so there we go. So this is the map we've now submitted with our application for the variance. And the reason why we're here is because 3 years after, a little over 3 years after you approved the variance in 2010, which allowed us to divide the property and have this conforming lot, you changed your regulations. And specifically, you changed section 1.9.6, or you created 1.9.6, which requires lots now to have the same minimum lot frontage, which is 200 feet, from the street line running all the way back to the rear line of that building square that you see in there. And as you can see from this lot, we don't have the 200 feet, and that area right now that Will was pointing out is the narrowest point in the lot, which is about 116 feet in width, and it needs to be 200 feet in width. So this variance is a request to reduce that 200-foot minimum width. It's supposed to run all the way from the street line to the back of the building square to allow this to become a building lot once again. Mr. Schoenberg did not realize that you had adopted that regulation in 2013. As I said, he lives in New York. He doesn't really have any family here in the area of the change in the regulation. And in fact, had entered into a contract to sell this lot to a builder who was going to build a house on it, and was under contract to sell it earlier this year. And it was in the course of the builder coming into the various departments in the town to make sure everything was in order, that it was discovered that everything wasn't in order, and in fact, that we now need this variance. With the exception of that variance for that width, the lot is completely conforming under your regulations, and the intention is to build a one-family house, consistent with the other one-family houses in the area. The minimum lot size in the RF2 zone, as you're aware, is 2 acres, and we have nearly 3 acres. The hardship is based on the change in the regulations. Will Agresta prepared a a staff memo, which I'm sure you have in your file, in which you did a great job of also explaining the history of the site as I've just summarized for you. And Will has been nice enough to point out under the proposed conditions section what your board must take into consideration if you're to grant the variance. And if you go through this list of questions that Will has pointed out need to be addressed, I believe we can meet all of the requirements for the grant of a variance. Just if you bear with me, I just read the second paragraph under proposed conditions. It says the ZBA may grant zoning variances with respect to a parcel of land when, quote, owing to conditions especially affecting such parcel, but not affecting generally the underlying zoning district in which it is situated, a literal enforcement of such regulations would result in exceptional difficulty or unusual hardship, end quote. In making its decision, the ZBA must consider public health, safety, convenience, welfare, property values. Applicant must also show the variance will not substantially affect the municipality's comprehensive zoning plan. So the hardship that must also be imposed by conditions outside the property owner's control in granting the area variance. The ZBA must address the following criteria. So he has bullet points here. If we go through the bullet points quickly, the first one, it must be impossible for the applicant's land to yield a reasonable return without the variance. Well, that's very clear in this instance. Without the variance, we cannot build on this lot. It is completely unusable 3 acres of land, which would otherwise be a nice building lot for the neighborhood, and we believe that the builder that we had originally contracted with would still be interested in buying it and developing a house. So the answer to that first bullet point is that without the variance, we have a zero value to this property. The second bullet point is the need for the variance due to the unique circumstances of the property and not the general conditions of the neighborhood. Again, we see that as being very clear. The need for the variance is due to the unique circumstances of the property, given its configuration and that narrow width, which, you know, back in 2010 and even as recently as 2013 would not have been a problem. Third bullet point, will the granting of the requested variance alter the essential character of the locality? The answer there is that it will not alter the essential character of the locality. Moreover, it's consistent with your municipality's POCD, the comprehensive zoning plan, to have a one-family residential building lot in this neighborhood. And last bullet point is the hardship the result of action taken by the landowner or a prior landowner. In other words, is the hardship self-created? That's clearly not the case here. This hardship is resulted from the change in your regulations 3 years ago. As I said, from 2010 to 2013, if he had sold the lot during that 3-year period, you would have seen nobody. It would have been all done over the counter with the building department. So that's the basis of our hardship. We respectfully request that it be granted, and a house will be built on the lot. And certainly your board was aware of that in 2010 when Mr. Schoenberg originally appeared before you, and when you granted that variance to allow lot number 1 to effectively be divided from the rest of the property and to be sold. So there should be no surprise here, and the only surprise is that we have to come back a second time.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions of Mr. Quattrello?
Well, I really have a question about the grandfathering. I don't understand the fact that it was a first cut division doesn't allow it to be grandfathered. I just don't understand that.
Do you want me to address that, or you?
Sure.
All right, so if, the way grandfathering works, if this property had been subdivided, you know, if it was not entitled to a free cut and it was a lot that had to come in
But it
before.
was subdivided, it just didn't go through the planning and zoning commission.
Well, see, but it wasn't really we call it a first cut or a division of the lot, but it's technically, if you want to use layman's jargon, yeah, it is a subdivision of the property. But because it wasn't a formal subdivision that was done through your planning and zoning commission, which is where you would normally go for a subdivision, it's not entitled to the grandfather. So the applicant came in before ZBA in 2010 to get the variance to allow a
Right, I
division
understand
free
that. I
cut.
just don't understand that it's a prior existing non-conforming lot.
It's not though, because they created it themselves without the auspicious of any review process or approval process from the planning and zoning commission under subdivision.
That's
It's not a
strange.
subdivision under law.
It's quirky, I agree.
It's
If
quirky,
if
yeah.
this were a three-lot subdivision in 2010,
Yeah,
and then the regulations subsequently changed,
Yeah.
the lot
yeah.
would be protected. It would
Yeah.
not need a variance. But by virtue of the fact that it wasn't a approved subdivision, they need to
Yeah.
come back for the second.
Because I mostly
Quite the
represent
effort.
developers, I'm on your side. I wish it were differently, but that's unfortunately not the way it works. So,
Well,
Okay.
if we got rid of the first cut division, we wouldn't have this problem.
well, don't do that.
Does that answer your question?
Sure.
Anybody else? Question? Thank you, Mr. Quattrelli.
Thank you. Appreciate the time.
Is there anyone else here that wishes to be heard on this matter? Questions, comments? No? Going once, going twice? We will then close the public hearing. And we will now go back to our normal section C of our agenda, deliberations on the table. You may not have had a chance to look at it, or with draft minutes from our last meeting, July 5th. I think all of us were here for that.
I just have one minor, just English mistake. Page 3 or 4, the top paragraph. Mrs. Banowski emphasized that both her and her husband, both she and her husband? No? Okay, that's it.
Can I take that to be a motion to approve with, subject to that correction?
Correct, yeah.
Seconded by Mr. Panici. All those in favor of the minutes as corrected, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None, they are approved. Next is we have deliberations on this application we just heard. Anybody have any comments, questions, motion?
I don't see how you cannot approve it, because there's a lot that exists. We can't tell a person they cannot use a lot because the Planning and Zoning Commission changed it. And, I mean, it's not something that's going to affect the area. It's still wide enough, it's got the frontage, you can put the house in there. I agree with the little list that we were given of how you can make a change for hardship, and I just think that this is a perfect example of where you have to give a hardship.
Anybody else?
I feel the same way. I mean, the hardship was created by the zone.
I agree completely. I appreciate Will's memo and the way it's outlined and the 4 bullet points there, and I agree with Mr. Quattrelli's response to that this application meets those standards because of the regulation change. I would agree with both of those statements. Anybody else?
I'll
Yeah.
make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve and seconded. Any questions on the motion before we vote? All those in favor of the motion to approve, say aye. Aye. Opposed? It is approved unanimously.
Build on it
Thank
this
you very
time.
much.
We can't do the organization meeting because we're missing a full member again.
It's up to you. I don't know that there's anything that prevents us from doing so, but whatever the board wants to do in that regard.
I thought that we had to have the full membership, isn't that?
You need to have a quorum of a full membership. We could, but if you want to table it, I don't know that there's a problem in doing that either.
Doesn't matter to me, but I just noticed, again, we don't have the full membership, but
I mean, technically, that's what the bylaws say, but I think at some point there's an out.
Bylaws.
that's why
You're probably right. I think it does say in the bylaws that you can't vote until you have all a full complement of members present. So again,
Put it off to the next time.
that's fine.
Now we'll just
Any-
keep
any-
putting it off.
Any movement in the world of getting a regular member, or maybe have an alternate moved up? We got
Giving up asking.
We have three alternates that are active and attending, so perhaps a battlefield promotion might be in order at some point.
Yeah.
But that, I know, it's out of your hands.
So we're missing one, we have a,
Yeah, we have a
miss-
vacant
we have a
member.
vacancy.
Right. Yep. And it's really up to, all right,
Okay.
I can, I'll shoot an email to the first selectman. I mean, I would, the normal course of business typically that I'm familiar with is when there's a vacancy, generally someone that's been an alternate would move up a notch and they'd appoint a new alternate. We'll see what happens.
Is it a Republican vacancy?
I don't keep track of that stuff.
Oh.
I try
I
to stay,
couldn't tell you either.
I try to stay out of that world.
Yeah, I think it is.
Nothing but
I
trouble.
think it's a Republican. Yeah, because you're the Democrat. You have one member, yes, it's a Republican vacancy.
I don't know that it is, unless you have.
It is, yeah.
There has to be one or the other.
Well, it's a
It is.
4-1, it's a 4-1 board.
I think we're already lopsided,
It's a
because
4-1
aren't you all
board. By
three
minority
Republicans?
representation, it's a
What?
4-1 board for.
Are you all, what are you all affiliated?
Republican?
Republican.
Yeah, that's what I thought, so we're already over on
Maybe it's a
that.
Democrat.
We're missing,
I don't
Or
know.
Democrat.
I couldn't tell you what anybody's affiliation is sitting here without asking, but I don't know that it, you just need what, you need at least,
Well, that's the way, there's no
We're missing a-
requirement about that, that's a
Right.
town
There's no
There's a
local
minority
preference.
representation.
yeah,
That's just a
on the
town
minority,
preference, there's no law.
we're missing one alternate, and I think the Republicans are missing one
Full member.
full member.
But how could you be missing one alternate? You've got three.
We're not
alternates.
missing one alternate. If
You
you
got
stick
three
to
We're
the-
three.
the alternates
are-
we have a full slate of alternates.
Yeah,
Yeah, the party designation is off, that's all.
so one of those guys is a Democrat,
No?
right?
No,
Well, how can that be?
one of those guys
Should be,
should be.
yeah. By minority representation, it should be.
That's my point, we should move one of them up to a full member.
But we can't do that.
I know we can't. It's not our, we don't need to worry about that.
Crazy. All right.
Anything else, anything upcoming in the hopper for September? Yeah. Quiet time of year. All right,
Okay, good.
we will adjourn. Thank you, folks, for coming out on such a beautiful evening.